She was tied to the railroad with a sign, until a cowboy stopped the train with his bare hands. Morning light spread slowly across the wide desert plains outside Red Mesa, turning the dust into gold. The town stood quiet between low hills and endless tracks of steel that cut across the land like a scar. The railroad was the lifeline of the settlement. Every crate of food, every tool, every traveler arrived by train. Without it, Red Mesa would fade into nothing. That morning something felt wrong. A small crowd had gathered near the tracks just outside town. Men and women stood at a distance, whispering to each other but not stepping closer. Some looked angry, some looked afraid, others looked ashamed. Tied tightly to the rails was a young woman. Her name was Clara Hale, though many in town barely knew her. She had arrived months ago with her younger brother, hoping to start fresh after losing their home far away. She worked quietly, fixing small machines, repairing tools, never asking for trouble. But today she lay against the cold steel, her wrists bound with thick rope. A wooden sign hung from her neck. The letters were bold and cruel. Thief. Dust blew across her face as she tried to lift her head. Her hair was tangled, her breathing uneven, but her eyes were fierce. She had shouted her innocence until her voice grew hoarse, but no one had listened. Two railroad guards stood nearby, rifles slung across their shoulders. Their uniforms were dark and sharp, marked with the emblem of the Iron Rail Company, the same company that owned the tracks, the trains, and in many ways the town itself. She stole company property, one guard said loudly whenever anyone asked questions. Punishment is final. But she's just a girl, an older woman whispered from the crowd. The guard turned cold eyes toward her. Company law, that ended the conversation. Clara swallowed hard and forced herself to stay calm. She thought about her brother, Tom, hiding somewhere in town. She hoped he wasn't watching. She hoped someone would protect him if she couldn't. I didn't steal anything, she said again, her voice cracking but steady. You know I didn't. The guards ignored her. Far away, a faint sound echoed across the desert. A train horn, low and distant at first, but growing stronger. The crowd shifted nervously. Everyone knew what was coming. The morning freight train never stopped outside Red Mesa. It passed at full speed, carrying cargo to distant cities. Clara closed her eyes for a moment. Fear rose in her chest, but she refused to cry. She would not give them that. Dust stirred along the ridge overlooking the tracks. A rider appeared against the rising sun. He moved slowly at first, guiding a dark horse down the slope with calm control. His coat was worn from years of travel, his hat pulled low to shield his face. Those who recognized him whispered quietly, "That's Eli Cade." The name carried weight. Eli was a cattle runner who lived outside town. He rarely spoke more than necessary. He traded fairly, worked hard, and kept to himself. Some said he had once been part of the rail security force before walking away. Others said he simply preferred silence. As he rode closer, he noticed the crowd. Then he saw the girl tied to the tracks. His horse slowed, sensing the tension in him. Eli studied the scene carefully, the guards, the sign around her neck, the fear in the eyes of the townspeople. His jaw tightened. He dismounted slowly. "What's happening?" he asked. One of the guards stepped forward. "Company business, move along." Eli's gaze shifted to Clara. She met his eyes, and for a moment everything around them faded. There was desperation there, but also strength. "She stole fuel cells," the guard added. "Punishment has been decided." Clara shook her head weakly. "That's not true." Eli looked back at the guard. "You got proof. That's none of your concern." Another train horn echoed, louder now. The rails beneath Clara began to hum faintly as vibrations traveled through the steel. The crowd stepped back instinctively. Eli glanced down the long stretch of track disappearing into the desert. In the distance, a shape appeared, massive and unstoppable. The train. He removed his gloves slowly, thinking. "You're really going to let it happen?" he asked the crowd. No one answered. Fear held them silent. The guard crossed his arms. "Last warning, leave." Eli looked at Clara again. Dust clung to her face, but her eyes were clear. She wasn't begging, she wasn't screaming. She was simply waiting, hoping someone would see the truth. Something shifted inside him. Without another word, Eli walked toward the tracks. The guard stepped forward. "Stop right there." He ignored them. The train grew larger, roaring across the desert, its metal body shining under the morning sun. Steam and smoke trailed behind it like a storm. Eli knelt beside Clara and pulled a knife from his belt. One guard grabbed his shoulder. "You interfere and you answer to the company." Eli turned slowly, his expression calm but unyielding. Then I'll answer. He cut one rope, but before he could finish, more guards approached, rifles raised. Step away. Eli stood, looking from the weapons to the approaching train. He realized they would not let him free her in time. The ground trembled. Clara's breathing grew faster. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. Eli didn't answer right away. He watched the train, calculating distance and speed. "Because it's wrong," he finally said. He removed a pair of worn metallic gloves from his saddlebag, old equipment, rarely seen anymore. The surface was scratched from years of use. He pulled them on slowly. The guards laughed nervously. "What do you think you're doing?" Eli stepped onto the tracks. Gasps spread through the crowd. He walked forward until he stood directly in the path of the oncoming train. The horn blared loudly, echoing across the desert like thunder. Wind whipped around him as the machine charged closer. "Move!" someone shouted. Eli planted his boots firmly against the steel rail. Dust rose around him. The train did not slow. Clara stared in disbelief. The engineer leaned on the horn again, desperate. Eli bent his knees slightly, bracing himself. The gloves began to glow faintly, humming with hidden energy. The distance closed rapidly. 10 seconds, 5, the crowd screamed. And just as the massive engine reached him, Eli raised his hands and met the unstoppable force head-on. The world exploded into sound and motion. And then everything stopped. The world seemed to break apart in noise. When Eli's hands touched the front of the engine, a deep thunder rolled across the desert. Steel screamed against steel. Dust rose high into the air, covering the tracks in a thick brown cloud. The people of Red Mesa covered their faces and stepped back. For a long second, no one could see what had happened. The train's horn blared once more, then cut off suddenly. When the dust began to settle, the sight before them did not make sense. The engine had stopped. Its massive iron body leaned slightly forward, wheels locked against the rails. Steam poured from its sides, but it was no longer moving. The front plate pressed hard against Eli's gloved hands. Eli's boots had carved deep lines into the dirt behind him. His knees were bent. His jaw was tight. The metallic gloves on his hands glowed with a faint blue light humming softly. Then the glow faded. Eli dropped to one knee, breathing hard. The crowd fell into complete silence. Clara blinked, unsure if she was still alive or dreaming. The engine stood only a few feet from her boots. He stopped it," someone whispered. The train engineer leaned out of the window, pale and shaking. He had pulled every brake, but he knew the truth. The train had not stopped because of him. The guards were the first to move. "This is interference with company operation?" one shouted angrily, though his voice trembled. "Arrest him!" But none of them rushed forward. They had seen what he had done. Eli pushed himself up slowly. His arms felt heavy and his hands shook inside the gloves. He walked back toward Clara without looking at the guards. "You can't just walk away," the lead guard barked. Eli knelt and cut the rest of the ropes quickly. Clara winced as blood returned to her wrists. He helped her sit up gently. "Can you stand?" he asked. She nodded, though her legs were weak. The sign around her neck swung forward. Eli removed it carefully and dropped it onto the ground. The word thief hit the dirt face down. "She stole company fuel cells," the guard repeated, but his voice no longer carried authority. Clara lifted her chin. "I did not steal anything." Eli looked at her calmly. "Tell me." The guard stepped forward again. "You don't get to question company judgment." Eli stood slowly to his full height. He was not shouting. He was not angry. But something steady and strong had settled in his eyes. "Then maybe company judgment needs questioning," he said. The townspeople shifted. A few stepped closer. For the first time that morning, the fear in their faces mixed with something else, curiosity, maybe even hope. The lead guard turned to the crowd. "Anyone who supports this act stands against the railroad. Remember who brings your food. Remember who controls your water shipments." That reminder hit hard. Red Mesa depended on the railroad for nearly everything. The Iron Rail Company owned the main well pumps that powered the town's water reserve. If they cut supply lines, the town would suffer. Clara gripped Eli's arm lightly. "They cut our water last week," she said quietly. Eli frowned. "Why?" "To force farmers to sign new land contracts," she replied. "They want full control of the outer fields. My brother found out they were siphoning extra power from the reserve. I only took the fuel cell casing to show proof." "You took evidence," Eli corrected softly. Clara nodded. The guards heard enough to understand what she was saying. "That's enough," the lead guard snapped. "You're spreading lies." Eli looked toward the crowd again. Has anyone else noticed the water pressure dropping? Several farmers exchanged uneasy looks. Old Mr. Turner, who owned land near the pumping station, stepped forward slowly. It has been weaker, he admitted. Thought it was just old pipes. The guard glared at him. Stay out of this. But something had changed. The train still stood frozen behind them, steam hissing like an impatient beast. Its delay alone would cost the company money. Eli removed the metallic gloves slowly. His hands were red and shaking, but steady enough. He turned back to Clara. "Where's your brother?" "In town." "Hiding," she said. "You'll stay at my ranch tonight," Eli said simply. "Both of you." The guard laughed harshly. "You think this is over? You've embarrassed the Iron Rail Company in front of everyone." Eli met his eyes. Then maybe they shouldn't have tied an innocent girl to the tracks. The silence that followed was heavy. The engineer climbed down from the engine, wiping sweat from his face. "We can't stay here all day," he muttered. "The schedule's already off." The lead guard seemed to weigh his options. Arresting Eli in front of everyone might cause panic, and no one was eager to test those glowing gloves again. "Fine," the guard said finally. "Take her, but this isn't finished." Eli did not respond. He helped Clara to her feet fully. She nearly collapsed again, but he steadied her. She was lighter than he expected, but stronger too. The crowd slowly parted to let them pass. For the first time, people looked at Clara not as a criminal, but as a victim. Tom ran forward suddenly from between two buildings, tears in his eyes. "Clara," she knelt and hugged him tightly despite the pain in her wrists. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're okay." Tom looked up at Eli with wide eyes. "You stopped it." Eli gave a small nod. "We should go." As they began walking toward the edge of town, whispers followed them. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe the company's pushing too hard. Maybe. Hope was a dangerous word in Red Mesa, but it had been planted. Behind them, the train finally began to move again, slowly at first, then picking up speed as it left the station area. The horn sounded once more, but this time it felt different, not powerful, but uncertain. By the time Eli reached his ranch outside town, the sun had climbed high into the sky. His ranch was simple, a wooden house, a stable and open land stretching far in every direction. Quiet, safe. Clara sat at the table while Eli cleaned the rope burns on her wrists. Tom stayed close, refusing to let go of her sleeve. "You didn't have to do that," Clara said softly. "Yes," Eli replied. "I did." She studied him carefully. "Those gloves, what are they?" "Old rail gear," he answered. "Used to handle heavy equipment years ago. They amplify force for short bursts." "You used to work for them?" Eli paused. "A long time ago," he said finally. "I left." Clara sensed there was more to the story, but she didn't push. A knock echoed suddenly at the door. All three froze. Eli stood calmly and stepped outside. 4 mounted enforcers waited at the fence line, dark uniforms shining under the sun. The lead rider spoke loudly. "By order of the Iron Rail Company, Eli Cade is to surrender the accused and submit for questioning." Eli leaned against the fence casually. "Or what?" "Or the company will consider you in direct opposition to its authority." Tom gripped Clara's hand inside the house. Eli looked at the horizon for a moment, then back at the riders. "You already consider me that," he said calmly. The riders exchanged glances. "This town survives because of us," the leader warned. "Don't force consequences." Eli's voice stayed steady. "You forced them when you tied her to the tracks." The standoff stretched long and quiet. Finally, the lead rider turned his horse slightly. "You've made yourself an enemy, Cade." Eli did not look away. "Then I'll be ready." The riders pulled back slowly, dust rising behind them as they rode away. Inside the house, Clara stepped to the doorway. "They won't stop," she said. "I know," Eli replied. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small metal device, a data chip. "This is what they wanted to destroy," she said. "It shows the extra power drain from the water reserve. Proof." Eli took the chip carefully, studying it. "If this is real," he said, "it changes everything." Clara nodded. "That's why they needed me gone." Eli looked toward town in the distance. The railroad tracks shimmered in the heat. The train had been stopped once, but the real battle was just beginning. And this time it wouldn't be about one girl tied to the rails. It would be about the entire town. The sun rose slowly over the plains, but Red Mesa did not wake in peace. Word had spread through the town like wildfire. The girl had survived. The train had stopped. And Eli Cade had stood against the Iron Rail Company. By mid-morning, people gathered in quiet groups outside shops and along wooden sidewalks. No one spoke too loudly. The company still had ears everywhere. At Eli's ranch, the air felt heavy. Clara stood near the small window, watching the road that led toward town. Tom sat at the table, staring at the metal data chip resting beside Eli's hat. "You really think this is enough?" Clara asked softly. Eli leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "If it shows what you say it shows, yes." "It does," she said firmly. "Extra energy output from the water pumps. They've been redirecting power to something else. That's why pressure dropped." Tom looked up. "So they made it look like the town's fault?" Clara nodded. "They wanted farmers desperate. Desperate people sign contracts." Eli picked up the chip again, turning it in his hand. He was not a machine expert, but he understood systems. He understood control. "If we show this to the right people," he said, "they'll have to answer." Clara gave a small, uncertain smile. "You think they'll let us show it?" Before he could answer, the sound of distant engines reached them. Not a train, ground vehicles. Eli stepped outside. 4 company trucks rolled down the dirt path toward his ranch, kicking up clouds of dust. Armed enforcers stood in the back of each one. They stopped in a line near the fence. The lead commander stepped out slowly. His uniform was cleaner than the others, his expression sharp and controlled. "Morning, Cade," he called out calmly. Eli rested one hand on the fence rail. "Morning. You've had time to think," the commander said. "Hand over the girl and the device she stole, and this ends quietly." Clara stepped out onto the porch behind Eli. "I didn't steal anything," she said clearly. The commander's eyes shifted to her. "You interfered with company systems, that's enough." Eli's voice stayed steady. "You tied her to a rail without proof." "We maintain order," the commander replied. "By fear?" Eli asked. The commander gave a thin smile. "Fear works." There was a long pause. Eli looked toward town in the distance. He knew the people were watching. This moment would matter. "You want her," Eli said calmly. "You'll have to explain yourself first in front of everyone." The commander's smile faded. "You don't get to make demands." "No," Eli said, "but the town does." As if summoned by those words, movement appeared down the road, farmers, shopkeepers. Families, they walked slowly toward the ranch, forming a growing crowd behind Eli's fence. They were not armed for battle. They were simply present. Old Mr. Turner stepped forward again. "We've had water problems for weeks," he said loudly. "If there's proof of tampering, we deserve to see it." Murmurs of agreement followed. The commander's jaw tightened. He had expected fear. He had not expected unity. "You're being misled," he said sharply. "This man interfered with a company train. That alone is punishable." Eli didn't raise his voice. "Then punish me, but don't hide behind lies." Clara stepped forward, holding the data chip high enough for everyone to see. "This shows power redirected from our pumps," she said. "They've been draining our water system to run something else." The crowd stirred louder now. "What's something else?" someone shouted. The commander hesitated for just a second too long. That hesitation said more than words. Eli noticed it. "You're building something," he said quietly. The commander looked at him with cold eyes. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Then explain it," Eli replied. Silence. The commander finally spoke, but his tone changed. "There's a larger rail expansion coming," he said. "New routes, new cities. Red Mesa is temporary." The word hit the crowd like a stone. "Temporary," Mrs. Alvarez repeated. "Our homes are temporary. The expansion requires power," the commander continued. "Your water reserve provided the most efficient solution." "So you drained us," Mr. Turner said. "It was within company rights," the commander answered. Eli shook his head slowly. "You don't own their lives." The commander stepped closer to the fence. "You think standing in front of a train makes you a hero? You've delayed progress." Eli's gaze didn't waver. "Progress doesn't crush people." The tension in the air thickened. One of the enforcers adjusted his weapon nervously. The trucks idled behind them, engines rumbling. Clara whispered to Eli, "If they cut supply lines, the town won't last long." He nodded slightly. He knew that, too. The commander made his final move. "Last chance," he said loudly. "Disperse, return the device, accept company oversight, and we restore full water pressure." The offer hung in the air like bait. Some townspeople looked uncertain. They had families, crops, debts. Eli understood their fear. He stepped forward, opening the fence gate, and walked out into the open space between both sides. He removed the metallic gloves from his saddlebag once more, not threatening, just visible. "I won't force anyone to stand with me," he said clearly. "You choose what kind of town this is." He turned to face the people behind him. "If we stay silent today, they'll take more tomorrow." The wind moved across the plains, carrying dust around their boots. One by one, the townspeople stepped forward, Mrs. Alvarez first, then Mr. Turner, then 3 ranch hands, then the blacksmith. Soon the space behind Eli was full. They did not shout, they did not attack. They simply stood together. The commander realized what was happening. He could intimidate individuals, but not all of them at once. "You're making a mistake," he warned. "No," Clara said quietly from behind Eli. "You did." The commander studied the crowd carefully, calculating risks. Any aggressive action now would spread beyond Red Mesa. Delayed trains already raised questions. He turned back toward his trucks. "This isn't finished," he said sharply. "The rail line can be rerouted." That threat chilled the crowd. Without the rail, Red Mesa would be isolated. Eli called out calmly, "You reroute it, and inspectors will ask why. And we'll show them the proof." The commander paused. He knew there were higher authorities above the local division. Exposure would not help him. He climbed back into his truck without another word. The convoy turned slowly and drove away, dust rising behind them once more. The crowd remained standing long after the engines faded into the distance. Tom looked up at Clara. "Did we win?" Clara exhaled slowly. "Not yet." Eli faced the townspeople. "They won't attack directly now," he said. "They'll try something else, maybe reroute. Maybe cut shipments slowly." "So what do we do?" Mr. Turner asked. Eli looked down at the data chip in Clara's hand. "We send this beyond them," he said, "to regional authority. If the expansion plan is real, someone higher approved it." Clara nodded. "There's a communications relay at the old junction station." "Guarded?" Eli asked. "Yes." He gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Then we move carefully." The people began discussing plans, not in panic, but with purpose. For the first time in years, Red Mesa wasn't reacting in fear. They were planning. As the crowd slowly dispersed to prepare, Clara stepped beside Eli. "You didn't have to stand out there alone," she said softly. "I wasn't alone," he replied, looking toward the town. She followed his gaze. He was right. That evening, the railroad tracks glowed faintly in the setting sun. The trains still ran, but something had shifted. The company had drawn a line in the sand, and so had Red Mesa. Tomorrow, they would take their proof to the relay station. Tomorrow, the truth would leave the desert, and the Iron Rail Company would realize something they had not expected. Stopping a train was impressive, but uniting a town was unstoppable. The desert night was quiet, but no one in Red Mesa slept deeply. Lanterns burned late in several homes. Farmers whispered over maps. The blacksmith checked old tools that had not been used in years. Mothers packed small food bundles just in case. At Eli's ranch, a single lamp glowed near the window. Clara sat at the wooden table, carefully securing the data chip inside a metal casing to protect it from damage. Tom slept nearby on a small cot, finally exhausted after the long day. Eli stood outside under the stars, watching the dark line of the railroad tracks in the distance. He knew the Iron Rail Company would not simply give up. Companies that powerful did not retreat easily, but he also knew something else. They did not expect resistance from people like this. When Clara stepped outside, the cool night air brushed against her face. "You think they'll block the relay station?" she asked. "Maybe," Eli replied, "but they won't expect us before sunrise." Clara looked toward town. "The relay tower is 3 miles east, near the old junction." "I know it," Eli said. "Used it once years ago." She studied him. "Back when you worked for them?" He nodded slowly. "Why did you leave?" she asked. Eli took a long breath before answering. "I thought I was helping build something better, faster routes, more supplies, but I saw towns disappear when they were no longer useful. I realized progress without people isn't progress." Clara said nothing, but her respect for him deepened. Before dawn, a small group gathered quietly at the edge of town. Eli, Clara, Mr. Turner, the blacksmith, 2 ranch hands. They were not marching to fight. They were moving with purpose. The plan was simple: reach the relay tower. Send the data beyond the iron rail's local control. Once transmitted, it could not be erased. The sky began to lighten as they rode out together. The desert stretched wide and silent around them. Halfway to the junction, Eli raised his hand. Tracks in the sand. Vehicle tracks. "Fresh, they were here," Mr. Turner whispered. Clara's grip tightened around the casing holding the chip. They continued slowly. The relay tower came into view, a tall metal structure rising beside an abandoned station building. Its signal dish pointed toward the horizon. And parked beside it were 2 company trucks. Enforcers stood guard. They moved faster than I thought, Eli said quietly. Clara swallowed. What now? Eli studied the area carefully. We don't rush. The group dismounted behind a low ridge. The enforcers seemed relaxed, expecting no one. They think fear will keep everyone home, Eli said. He turned to Mr. Turner. Ride back halfway and wait. If we don't return by noon, spread word. Mr. Turner hesitated but nodded. Eli looked at Clara. You stay close to me. She met his eyes. I'm not hiding. He gave a small nod of respect. Together, they walked openly toward the relay station. The guards noticed them quickly. Halt, one called out. Eli stopped but did not raise his hands. We're here to use the relay, he said calmly. Station is closed, the guard replied. Public communication line, Clara said firmly. We have a right. Not today, the second guard stepped forward. Turn around. Eli's voice remained steady. We're not here to cause trouble. We're here to send proof of water diversion to regional authority. At that, both guards stiffened. You have nothing, the first guard said. Clara lifted the casing slightly. We do. The guards exchanged a look. For a moment, tension hung in the air like a drawn bowstring. Then Eli did something unexpected. He stepped aside. If you're confident, he said quietly, let us send it. If it's false, nothing changes. The guard hesitated. Behind them, the rising sun cast long shadows across the desert. More riders appeared in the distance, townspeople coming slowly, not charging, just present. The guards saw them too. The blacksmith stood with folded arms. Two farmers waited quietly behind him. The crowd was not large, but it was enough. The first guard shifted uneasily. We're under orders. From a local commander, Clara said, not from the authority above him. The second guard looked toward the trucks. If we stop them now, it becomes force. The first guard exhaled sharply. They were not prepared for a peaceful standoff. They were prepared for fear. Finally, the first guard stepped back. You get one transmission, he said. After that, you leave. Eli nodded once. Inside the relay station, dust covered the old consoles, but the equipment still hummed softly. Clara moved quickly. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. She inserted the chip into the main port. Screens flickered alive. Data lines scrolled across the display. Energy diversion logs, water pump drain records, rail expansion memos marked temporary relocation. Mr. Turner stepped inside, staring at the screen. They plan to abandon us. Clara nodded. Signal locked, she said quietly. Transmitting now. A progress bar moved slowly across the screen. Outside, more townspeople arrived. No shouting, no chaos, just witnesses. The guards stood uncertain, watching both the building and the growing crowd. Inside, the bar reached halfway, then three-quarters, then transmission complete. The message was sent. Clara leaned back slightly, exhaling. Eli allowed himself a small breath of relief. Outside, a new sound echoed across the desert. Another convoy. But this one bore different markings, the crest of Regional Infrastructure Authority. The guards' faces drained of color. Two official vehicles approached and stopped near the tower. Uniformed inspectors stepped out, holding digital tablets. We received a flagged transmission, one inspector said clearly. Energy misuse and unlawful infrastructure diversion. The first guard swallowed. We were unaware. You're relieved of control of this station pending review, the inspector said calmly. The townspeople murmured in disbelief. The local iron rail commander arrived minutes later in his own vehicle, anger visible on his face. But he said nothing when he saw the inspectors. The evidence had already been sent. There was no erasing it now. By afternoon, official seals were placed on the water control systems. The commander was escorted away for questioning. No shouting, no chaos, just quiet consequences. As the sun began to set, Red Mesa felt different. Water pressure returned to normal. The relay tower remained under neutral control. The rail line still ran, but under temporary oversight. Clara stood beside Eli at the edge of town, watching a train pass slowly in the distance. It did not roar as loudly as before. It seemed almost cautious. Tom ran up beside them. They can't hurt us now, right? Clara smiled gently. They can't hide anymore. Eli adjusted his hat slightly. You stopped the train, Tom said to him again. Eli shook his head softly. No. Tom frowned. But you did. Eli looked toward the town, at the farmers, the shopkeepers, the families talking openly for the first time in days. I just slowed it down, he said. The town stopped it. Clara studied him quietly. You could leave, she said. Go back to being alone. Eli looked across the plains. For years he had chosen distance, silence, isolation, but something had changed. He glanced toward the ranch road. "I think I'll stay a while," he said. Clara smiled. As night fell over Red Mesa, lanterns lit up along the wooden streets. Conversations carried through open windows. Laughter returned carefully like a shy visitor. The railroad still stretched across the desert. The company still existed, but fear no longer ruled the town. Because one morning, when a girl was tied to the tracks with a sign meant to shame her, someone had refused to look away. And when he stood in front of a train, he had not only stopped steel and steam, he had started something stronger: courage. And that was something no company could reroute.